Okay, folks, I'd like to go ahead and get started with the final session of the afternoon, and I'll try not to walk in front of the speaker like I did in the last session and create lots of feedback for you. My name is David White. I'm a senior research analyst with the ARC group, and I'm delighted to present the session on analytics for you this afternoon. After I've done about 15 minutes or so to introduce the topic, Bill Gillette from Logilube is going to present on an analytics solution they've developed. And then we'll have a panel session as well where we invite Lior and Keith onto the stage as well to take questions from you. Quick plug, just like I made in the machine learning session earlier, most of us on the industrial IoT team at ARC blog frequently. Basically once a day, some of us blog on this website here. So it's a great place to go and find the current thinking and research that we have. It typically gets published there before it gets put on paper. So I write about analytics and cloud, and other people chip in on devices and control systems and so on. So go there. You can sign up for a newsletter so the content will get pushed to you on a weekly basis if you don't want to keep going back to the blog. So a few months ago, I did a presentation on big data analytics for the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, and the guy who was running that track actually sent me this image at the start and said, well, this is how I feel about big data. This was his bait, if you will, to get me to speak. This is how I feel about big data. It's like the blind man and the elephant. You've got all these people running around and feeling it, and they can feel a certain bit of the elephant, and they think it's one thing, and somebody else thinks it's something different. Nobody really understands what big data is because they can't see the big picture. So in the same spirit, I sent him back an image in an email as well and said, I like your elephant metaphor, but it's the wrong one. Because big data isn't a thing, it's a journey. And quite honestly, most of you are probably already on it and you just don't know it yet. So let's talk about how big data, as we define it, is going to change the way you need to do analytics. I'll talk about one or two other technologies as well, which are going to be part of the analytics solutions, which I think you'll adopt in the near future, and we'll hear that from our panel experts too. We'll make it very simple, right? Data from the industrial Internet of Things. As far as most of you in the room are concerned, that's your big data. That's where your volume, velocity, variety, all that different things about big data, all the V's about big data is going to come from. It's going to come from the industrial Internet. So when we talk about the industrial Internet of Things, a thing is basically an intelligent asset. So we're putting processing, communication, storage onto assets, devices, sensors everywhere throughout the network, on machines, on products, on things you ship to your customers. We're starting to instrument all of those things with low-cost technologies. The circuit board on the right there is a Raspberry Pi 2. Comes with a quad-core processor, 1 gigabyte of RAM, Ethernet, HDMI, runs various flavors of Linux, runs Windows 10, and it's yours for 35 bucks. Okay, doesn't get much cheaper. Put that in a tin box, give it some power with the sensors, and you can basically instrument most things pretty cheaply these days. If we see about some of the early initiatives in this area, I used this example before, GE engine on a Boeing 787. Generates 5,000 data points a second. Okay, 250 million data points for 2 engines on a transatlantic flight. All that data you can use to improve fuel economy, efficiency, maintenance, and so on. You need to start collecting that data, figuring out how you're going to use it, and that's going to change the way that you use analytics. Because this is your grandfather's analytics or BI or operational intelligence, we have a number of transactions, those drips there, pouring into the operational systems, the ERP, the MES supply chain systems, capturing those transactions. And then at some point in time, we basically batch all those up and we fire them across to the data warehouse, or you could collect them in an historian. And we do that periodically, maybe once a week, once a month, once a day even. And we lay reports and dashboards and various charting tools on top of that. That is how we've done analytics by and large in the past. Now when we get to the industrial Internet of Things, you can see that the transaction rate, the data coming in, comes in much faster, there's much more variety of data. We're not just talking about data we collect internally anymore. We're taking data from our supply chain partners. We're taking data from the weather, for example, public data sources that we can bring in. We might be using textual analytics as well. Much richer data sources that we're bringing in. And that means that this legacy system isn't going to work much anymore. The reason being, very simply, it takes us too long to get from those events that occur to getting insight on those events. And because it takes too long, things are going to break. We're going to lose productivity. We're not going to be optimal in the way we run the business. So one of the things we can do about that is we take our dashboards, reports, and so on, and we move them close to the source data. We put them on the edge so that we intercept that data before it gets stored. So we can get real-time insight. We can use technologies like stream processing. We can use technologies like predictive analytics and machine learning to get those insights much earlier by intercepting that data in flight, essentially, rather than when it's stored. So one quick example of how we do that, and Bill will talk about another one later. Swearing and Hassa make copper magnet wire. So it's a fine wire which goes into motors and transformers. Companies like Bosch and Siemens are their customers, so you probably have some of their wire in your car somewhere. They make enough wire every day to go 3.5 times around the Earth. So they make a lot of wire. They have 400 production plants running 24/7. Now, the wire has to be made to very fine tolerances. It's embedded, basically, so the cost of replacing it if something goes wrong is very expensive. They make the wire to fine tolerance. The layer of insulation is made to a fine tolerance. And in the past, they would basically make the wire, and then they would destructive test some of it to figure out whether the quality was good or not. What they now do is they collect 20,000 data points a second from throughout the plant. So they're looking at the temperature of ovens, they're looking at the RPM of cooling fans, they're looking at the speed of the wire feed and so on. They're collecting all this data so they can respond in real time to production issues. That lets them have much higher quality. It lets them reduce the scrap in that plant because they've moved that analytics further forward and analyzing the data as it's created. So that's one of the things we're going to do is to move analytics close to the edge. A couple of other things are going to be important too. And one of those is the cloud. Now, typically we draw a cloud as a nice fluffy thing with connections going in and out of it. This is really the cloud, right? This is some pictures of Google's data center. It is thousands and thousands of processors, disk drives, in a large warehouse-type facility. Some people have been using refurbishing old shopping malls, for example, as cloud storage facilities. So they're massive data entries. Now, why would you want to use those? Well, think about this for a second. So the rectangle here, right, the area of the rectangle here, corresponds to the cost of a gigabyte of disk storage. So that's what a gigabyte of disk cost you in 1996. That's 2001. Okay, and there's about 2 little green pixels right at the end there, which you probably can't see anymore. That's the cost of storage now. So we've gone, in 20 years, we've gone from $295 a gigabyte to 2.8 cents a gigabyte. Storage used to cost us 10,000 times as much 20 years ago. Can you believe that? It just blows my mind. But the good thing is the storage technology is getting cheaper, so we can store all this data. The bad news is that's not really where your cost is. The cost is in your people. According to Computer World, that's the average salary increase for all these job roles in just the last year alone. So although technology is getting getting cheaper, the people aren't getting any cheaper. So you're going to use those key skills for strategic things, or you're going to use them for commodity things like storage of all that data that you get. So there's definitely a cost element to the cloud, but there's also an agility element as well. So this is a real example from T-Mobile. T-Mobile are a fairly early adopter of SAP HANA, which is an advanced analytic database which combines analytics with transaction processing in a single box. Now, when it first came out, it was an on-premise appliance solution. So you basically bought it from one of 5 or 6 hardware vendors with HANA pre-installed, dropped it in, and away you went. T-Mobile used that. They liked it. They had one on-premise solution. They wanted to use it again, try it in a proof of concept for another project. Now, SAP are pretty coy about the cost of HANA. It's pretty hard to figure out exactly what it costs. But if you do it on-premise, it's roughly the price of a small car. Okay, so buying HANA and dropping it in, $20,000, give or take. Do that on Amazon's cloud, it's about the price of a cup of coffee an hour. Okay, $3 or $4 for a 14-day project. So the economics are quite compelling, but also it would take them 4 months just to procure the box to put it on premise for a proof of concept that you want to do in 14 days. That doesn't make a lot of sense when you can do it in 10 minutes on the cloud. So what the VP did in this case, when she found out it would take them 4 months to get the box, she got out a corporate credit card, signed on to Amazon Web Services, and they were up and running with their proof of concept. So not only are there cost advantages, but there's tremendous agility advantages you can get from the cloud as well. Now at this point, I think there's really only 2 kinds of companies. There are companies, the first kind of company has policies in place for how people can use the cloud, what data they can store, what applications they can run there. The second kind of company is a company that doesn't let their users use the cloud at all. But in fact, everybody's doing it anyway, because we all use Dropbox and things like that to shuffle files around. So you will put data in the cloud. Everybody's doing it. There is a trade-off, I think, between do I keep everything in an in-house data center where I believe it's more secure, or do I maybe outsource some of that to the cloud so that I'm more agile, I can take more projects on, and I can innovate faster. If we think about risk and security, some of the things you have to ask yourself is my data security team really better than the one they have at IBM, or Amazon, or Microsoft, or Google? I would bet a lot of industrial companies can't quite afford to employ the same level of data security talent that those companies can. The other technology I see coming to the fore is something called a NoSQL database, which No stands for not only SQL. This is a chart from a website called DB Engines, which ranks the popularity of websites over years. You can see this runs for about a 2.5-year period, 3-year period. They rank popularity based on forums, on job posts, on things like that. So the 3 right at the top are Oracle, MySQL, and SQL Server. And there's a log scale down the side, so you can see the others are some way behind. The 3 at the top, they're all SQL databases. Oracle came to market with a commercial database, SQL database in 1979, I think, the first relational database. They basically rode the Unix market, the wave of the Unix market, to success. Microsoft SQL Server, another relational database, rode Windows Server to success, and then MySQL as well, which is an open source database, ironically now owned by Oracle, basically rode the Linux wave to success as well. So they're the 3 biggest commercial data stores by far. The other 3 on here, MongoDB, Cassandra, and Hive, these are NoSQL data stores. So they're coming more to the fore now as well. I'll talk more about those in a second. But they're providing new levels of agility and flexibility and scalability, which relational databases struggle to do. And that's because relational databases come from an era, the 1980s, when your computing was basically, I'm going to buy a box and everything sits in the box. So I have a CPU in the box, I have my memory in the box, I have my disk in the box. I can maybe upgrade the CPU, I can add more memory, but I'm really scaling inside that box. And all the components are very tightly coupled. And one of the reasons for that is that the relational database has very tight locking constraints as well to make the transaction acid. So things like your bank account run on those kind of databases because they're very reliable about the integrity of the data. NoSQL databases trade off some of that data integrity, so they're not for all applications by any stretch, but they're basically designed to be loosely coupled. They're designed to run in distributed environments like the cloud. They scale horizontally. They're not just scaling within the box, they're scaling across networks, across multiple systems. And so MongoDB, Cassandra, and Hive are all NoSQL databases that have those kind of scalabilities, which you can use to store these increasing amounts of data that you get. They're just not going to be suitable for all types of applications.